Hi everyone, my name is Eden Ben-Shabbat. I wasn't in the last introduction presentation because I just helped John here in Berlin with the presentation itself. But as I said, I'm Eden, one of the hosts today. I'm originally from Israel, from Automotive Technologies, and of course in SYNERGIES. I just want to present our next keynote, Manuel Sandler. And this keynote is about to be implementing CySec in automotive development projects, right? 7 management engineering must-haves. So Mr. Manuel is a partner of CYBERSECURITY Consulting, and I'll just let him the stage. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot for the introduction, Eden. So hello and welcome from my side. So we are very happy to present today our keynote at this conference. So we want to open with a talk about empowering the correct implementation of cybersecurity in automotive development projects. So in this context, we want to share some experiences we made the last years, apart from technical details about encryption or the theory of the standards and regulations. And for this, we have identified 7 prerequisites that must be, from our point of view, present in management and engineering to implement cybersecurity successful. So my name is Manuel Sandler. As Eden said, I'm partner at CYBERSECURITY Consulting. And of course, very proud for this opportunity today to share my thoughts and to share my ideas with you. CYBERSECURITY Consulting, maybe some of you know us, we support all kinds of automotive stakeholders, car manufacturers, tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. And our approach is to provide a strategic guidance and an operational implementation of cybersecurity in automotive development. So for our presentation today, we have reflected the last years in order to identify the reoccurring and most important challenges in this context. So on the one side, we have the standards and regulations. Compared to a few years ago, the theory, I would say it's much more clear now. Of course, a lot of space for interpretation, but at least we have the UNR 155, we have the ISO 21434, so we have something available. But nevertheless, still many companies and projects are still currently struggling with cybersecurity. And as a kind of lesson learned, we want, as I said, outline 7 prerequisites in order to sustainably implement cybersecurity in automotive context. So of course, 30 minutes are not enough for that. So understand the following, some kind of an overview or as an assistance with recommendations from which you hopefully can derive something meaningful for your projects. The first one, or the first prerequisite for us, it's the definition of distinctions and synergies with IT security or information security. When you think about the organization, where is the cybersecurity competence center located? And where and how are the IT security skills located? As you here in this conference, in this group, there are people who are dealing with cybersecurity and they are not getting confused between cybersecurity and IT security. But especially if you're working in a big company, what is the organization-wide view on this? And here we saw the discussion of these questions is quite crucial. Where are the overlaps? Where are the opportunities for synergies? Where can a mapping be created between IT security and embedded cybersecurity? Where can processes adapted and reused? On a regular basis, we get client requests to implement a cybersecurity management system, combined with a statement, yeah, we already have an ISMS, Information Security Management System. So that already should cover most of the work, right? And actually it does not. So the ISO 27K, from our point of view, does not really change anything about the efforts which are necessary to implement a cybersecurity management system. And of course, it does not replace that at all. But where are these differences and why there are so much differences? So let's first take one step back. Why cybersecurity is such a challenge for automotive organization as of now? Well, for one thing, there's a unique challenge in the nature of things in terms of cybersecurity itself. We have to realize that the entire industry currently is experiencing a paradigm shift. The car itself is becoming a new type of product, which means that all the challenges arising from cybersecurity are suddenly becoming an important issue, like unclear costs, unclear efforts, new competencies, new technical challenges. So the challenges are increasing and increasing. But for the product itself, for the organizations and the value chain behind it, and for each individual who is somehow involved, in addition to these urgent issues, still the following is happening. At the same time, we get concrete requirements, we get regulatory specifications, legal obligations, and a lot of mandatory things to execute. All this is already emerging at the same time and creating more and more pressure on the industry, on the manufacturer, on the tier ones, but also on consulting companies and everyone who is involved. And this is currently creating a critical status quo in the industry compared to IT security, where cybersecurity or security itself is already established. Maybe sometimes not in the perfect world or in the perfect way, but it's already present. And also from a technical point of view, let's take some attack vectors, or better said, targets of attacks, to show actually how different they are, or they can be. Looking at a typical car, we have potential targets of attacks, which could be the sensors, could be the actors like the brakes, of course, the infotainment system, the most obvious device, I would say, for cybersecurity. Telemetrics, so the whole way of exchanging data, information. Quality security feature, or actually the driving behavior, and especially in the context of ADAS system or autonomous driving, additional features, additional safety features, additional ADAS features can create further attack points. Or as another example, the onboard diagnostic or the keyless entry. So as you can see, quite obvious, that had nothing to do with IT security. But okay, I explained why automotive is special, but let's compare both. In information security, information security is protecting your organizations and the infrastructure. 24/7, reacting more or less in real time on new vulnerabilities and new attacks. And usually it's more or less independent from your development projects. Just a simple example, spam filter in your email box, or the access control to your office. If we consider cybersecurity, we need to be aware that it's impacting all phases of the product lifecycle. So to protect a car during its operational phase, so when the car is on the street, controls already need to be anticipated during the pre-development and development. So sometimes 3 to 4 years before the car is actually on the street. And just imagine how technology is changing in that time frame. And there are more differences. So if we look to IT security, where we have more or less unlimited memory space and computing power, and for our vehicles, we are talking about embedded systems. We have more or less for IT security established concepts, and for our vehicles, let's say we are still in the developing phase. And there are more differences, but nevertheless, if you look in the middle here of this slides, there are also synergies which can be reused. For both sides, we need to have a policy. We need to have tools and processes which can be adapted and reused. Just considering incident management, that's something which is already present since decades in IT security. Now we call it, based on the ISO, the continuous cybersecurity activities, but the intention is the same. And also software update management is a good example how both disciplines need to merge together. So it's important to understand it's two different topics, but still should not be considered isolated, because there are still a lot of synergies. And what we experience so far, either it's completely combined, which does not, from our point of view, not make sense, or completely separated. But it's important to see, okay, where are the interfaces and where can both disciplines help each other. Coming to our point 2, to consider quality in development within cybersecurity scope. So what we observe in our projects around cybersecurity is that organizations have a particular critical situation, of course, for cybersecurity, but most of those also have a general issue in various questions of quality. It's clear that cybersecurity will take on, let's say, a new dimension of quality. And if the car of the future is based to a much greater extent than before on software, programming, the whole software code, then it's clear that the associated cybersecurity requirements will also have a significant influence on quality. And this is where the problem becomes apparent. So cybersecurity cannot be seen as a standalone solution. It runs through everything. And accordingly, the chain here is only as strong as the weakest links. This means that many other quality issues in the development process suddenly become also relevant for cybersecurity. Just a very simple example, what we see, that I would see in almost each second of our project, a static software analysis to ensure that you have a proper quality of your software code. But of course, this also helps to detect weaknesses which affect cybersecurity, just as a very basic example. And cybersecurity, sometimes I would say it's a similar than functional safety, some kind of a special topic. So what I mean is, both are multidisciplinary, both are impacting projects as well as the organization, and in the end, both can impact the health of human people. And in this context, I like the term house of quality, since from our understanding, a proper quality management system builds the foundation, the basement for those both disciplines. So they can be seen as a mandatory precondition. Otherwise, you will fail in developing a safe and secure product. And as you probably know, also the 21434 requires a quality management system behind. But why is that so important? So let me give you some examples. So if you talk about project management, without a proper planning, you come into a time and a cost overrun. You have overloaded people, which usually make more failures, which could introduce vulnerabilities in your product. Or reviews, often skipped due to missing capacity. But what is the result? Documents, requirements are not understandable or incorrect, and maybe wrong things or things are implemented in the product, or things are missing. Another example is risk management. So also here, unfortunately, in many projects, especially in a firefighting mode, they are not in place or there's no capacity for that. But the result is that cybersecurity risks, and I'm not only talking about the technical risk from the TARA, also project-related risks coming from cybersecurity or identified due to cybersecurity, cannot be addressed and therefore not mitigated properly. And I know it from our own experience. Also in our projects, we need always to push our team to do a proper risk management in the projects, even if it costs time. And even usually preventive measures or the success of preventive measures is not always measurable. Another example, the document management. So also in many cases, there are no rules in place. Documents are stored locally or distributed across various SharePoints. So it's almost impossible to find the right version. And then also good luck for the assessment. Requirements management is another example. So we have customers who ask us to support for cybersecurity, but the developers never wrote a requirement before. So also that it's just not working. And as to further examples, configuration management, change management. So if you have various versions of a work product for cybersecurity, maybe you'll use obsolete versions as an input. It's also, does not support at all. But how to achieve quality and how to reach the amount of quality we need for cybersecurity. And actually, it's not a rocket science. So just as a few ideas is, of course, to plan realistic instead of having a firefighting. For cybersecurity, there are efforts. And it doesn't help to hide the efforts, even if there are more costs for the projects, but the plans need to be realistic. And another quick win is to allocate your cybersecurity deliveries to your project gates. So if things are missing or incomplete, that this is detected latest at your milestones. Of course, also from a cybersecurity point of view, follow engineering standards and common practices, ASPICE and other options. Also to establish an independent quality assurance team. So what we also observe is that there are cybersecurity teams working and have a technical knowledge, but nobody is monitoring them. Nobody is checking if they are really doing the right things in the context of the project. Also, always a quick win to do some peer reviews. Don't let one person to do all the work in cybersecurity because everyone makes mistakes and you need several persons to improve the quality. Also apply, especially if it's already existing, configuration and document management. So don't avoid just doing something. So it should be done in a systematical way. Also in terms of the usage of state-of-the-art tools. Still, Excel is not a proper tool for requirements management. And last but not least, to document each decision and measure. So to make the whole thing reproducible. So let's come to number 3. Strategic implementation instead of island-like patchwork. So how is cybersecurity handled in your organization? Do you see yourself on one of these islands? Or maybe here on the small boat? Then you're not so wrong. So too often the cybersecurity landscape looks like this. Isolated solutions are set up, individuals are given responsibilities and tasks, and this is where patchwork is done instead of setting up an organization-wide structure for the most important cybersecurity aspects on a global level. So something is done for one customer, but there's no time to set aside for sustainable, holistic solution. Each time a new ad hoc solution is implemented instead of a sustainable approach. And this becomes a spiral of wasted resources. And companies stay in this situation for years. Either too busy to improve, or they just say, okay, never change a running system. But on the long term, and that's what we all see in all of our projects, and I assume you agree, it does not work. And I would like to have a short look on cybersecurity processes to explain why a strategic implementation should replace isolated solutions. So as you know, ISO SAE 21434 requires cybersecurity rules and processes from the organizations. And probably, as you know, just creating something by an isolated team and throw it over the fence does not work. So you need to define processes, you need to establish them, you need to pilot them, you need to talk to the people to assess them. Are you on the right track? Are you compliant to the standard? Does it really support the people who need to use it? And therefore, call them to improve it continuously. So you need to work with the people who are using the projects. And again, we are in the automotive industry, so we need to consider automotive standards. So here, we cannot do something isolated from the automotive world. And cybersecurity has interfaces to other projects, to other processes. Requirement management process, you have also cybersecurity requirements. Project management process, you need to plan your tasks, or the whole supporting processes, as already mentioned, configuration management, document management, change management are preconditions. So cybersecurity must be integrated also in the overall process landscape. Otherwise, you have several risks like insufficient processes, as mentioned, isolated approaches, or just missing compliance to contracts or agreements. Number 4, that's actually my favorite one, commitment for management and organization for cybersecurity. So in addition to our consultancy work, we are doing education offers. We do some different kind of trainings for engineers, developers, quality managers. So they all learn details about cybersecurity. Almost always, there comes a point where one thing becomes clear. After the training, it's more precise what has to be done and how it could be done. However, in many companies, what we see and what we hear from the people, there's another problem. the C-level or the higher management. Unfortunately, that's still true, and still sometimes it's not realized that the implications of cybersecurity is on almost everything, and it's not realized the wide extent what is required. So again, I assume all here they know the impact of cybersecurity, but in traditional decision-making structures, in all the big companies, which will only slowly change, executive committees, management boards, and the right awareness for the organization why topics around cybersecurity is often still very low. And of course, and that's also their job, sometimes they only see the costs and the investments that need to be done. And if you look in different kind of business magazines, you always can read about the role of software, the role of data, but cybersecurity should be on the same page here. And the issue of cybersecurity and how it is being treated in many cases in a negligible way is a huge challenge for everyone who needs to push it and who wants to move things forward. And also the standard is quite clear. So 21434, the first requirement is to have a cybersecurity policy in place, which should contain the acknowledgement of the road vehicle risks, so that risks are really present. And second, the commitment from the executive management to manage those risks. So the class standard clearly says the decision maker need to make a statement, yes, we are handling cybersecurity, we are dealing with that. And the 21434 proposes to establish a policy, probably you know that from the standard, to enforce it by rules and processes, to enable it by responsibilities, and to ensure it by sufficient resources, which ends up that companies also get more efficient, don't waste too much money, have a dedicated way forward, and develop secure products. But unfortunately, what we still see is, especially on supplier level, that cybersecurity and the ISO have been ignored the last years until the first customer comes and says, how I want to have cybersecurity. Are you prepared for that? So no own initiative before the acquisition, not preparing for the future, just reacting, which again results in a firefighting mode. Or what we already saw, to reject demand from customers due to the high investments, which actually is a danger for your whole business. So as we all know, due to the UNR, it's a must-have to bring the cars on the street. Of course, for the OEM, but they are, as we all know, forwarding that to their suppliers as well. Also very often, so even if projects try to integrate cybersecurity, it's a bit related to the isolated approaches. There's no reuse from previous processes and projects. So again, every time starting from the scratch. Or I already mentioned that the effort is underestimated. So yes, we do it, but here you have one resource for 4 projects. It does also not work. Or then the other way around, people are realizing we need to do something and have an extensive actionism to meet the targets without really talking to the projects and also getting the whole circumstances. Also, or an actionism just to show the customers what has been accomplished, but only doing it for the customer and not for their own intention. So from our point, of course, not in all companies, but at least in many ones, there's still improvement to provide a dedicated way forward from top to down. Number 5, a structure, synergies, and reuse as a catalyst for cybersecurity. So I mentioned already now several times the challenge with isolated solutions. Now we want to point out exactly or explicitly what we see as a major thing for ensuring a sustainable cybersecurity across the projects and all the customers. So to create the precondition for reuse. So cybersecurity along the requirements of the customers and the requirements of the standards and regulations. These things are reoccurring across different projects. So we have the same work products to do in each project, and also the technical controls are quite similar. So it's always the same setup of secure boot, encryption, etc. So therefore, it's absolutely necessary to stop thinking from project to project. And we need to carry out new evaluations and thinking in, with the big pictures, with a systematical way of working across different projects and different projects. And that is also one of the biggest challenge, especially on supplier level, to use synergies to talk to each other and to build a holistic solution and reuse the things in terms of processes, in terms of requirements, controls, templates across in the whole organization. And cybersecurity does not need to reinvent the wheel. So just to give you 4 ideas to define a structure between organizational and project cybersecurity aspects. So as mentioned, start avoiding thinking from project to project, leverage and update existing TARAs. So also here you can reuse things, attack passes, the evaluations, and think about which are the requirements, which are the controls, which you can use in several projects. The second point, a systematic reduction of avoidable effort. Use templates. That's one of the easiest things we see in, again, 70-80% of our projects. Use templates, define a clear way of working, and apply lessons learned. In many projects or many cases, people do that the first time. It's the first time they're in contact with cybersecurity. And it's a human nature to make mistakes. But we need to learn from it because the pressure is increasing and increasing and the time gets shorter and shorter. Also leveraging with neighboring disciplines for support. For example, functional safety. We have similar structure of processes, of course, a different content, but nevertheless, there are a lot of overlaps. For example, both disciplines need an item definition. Why not merging that to one document? In both disciplines, we need to think about our software tools we are using. Why not merging that? Why are not using synergies? Or, as mentioned at the beginning, between cybersecurity and IT security. And last but not least, and also here we see a huge potential, an efficient handling of public available information. So there are various databases available out on the internet, open for each and everyone, from the IT, but also already for cybersecurity. So we should try to use that and avoid, again, reinventing the wheel. Use things which are available, where a lot of people already made thoughts about it. All right, coming to number 6. So it's the setup of the organization, roles, and responsibilities. So when we realize that cybersecurity requires a wide range of activities, especially in management and organization level, okay, I need to move on a bit, then it's clear that we need a dedicated structure. So what we see in many cases, that cybersecurity is just moved to functional safety. But that's an easy solution, but it's a question if it's the best one. And the more complex the organization is, especially with thousands of employees, the more important is it to establish the right setup. So to set up the areas of responsibilities, and above all, to communicate that in the right way. Also here, to get a better understanding what I mean, let's have a short look on the 21434, which says that organizations shall assign and communicate responsibilities. But why do we need these roles, these global roles? What we saw is you need, first of all, a central point of contact for the questions. A lot of questions are raised to define the strategies, to make decisions. So if nobody is making a decision, nothing will move forward. And if nobody feels responsible for that, companies can stay at the same point in time or the same level for months or even years. And also to ensure an independent reporting escalation path. So if things are not working, again, to have a go-to person who also acts as a leader for mindset change. Or as another example, so the ISO states that organizations shall provide resources to address cybersecurity, but also here be aware that it's more than just a cybersecurity manager. So you need to set up an organization, you need to build up competences and know-how, and of course, the infrastructure. And so what it needs in the end for an organization-wide structure, it's the organization itself to define roles and responsibilities, a dedicated framework instead of firefighting, and a cascadable version for each and everyone can follow. So coming to my last part, the last prerequisite for today, the cybersecurity awareness and culture throughout the product lifecycle. So cybersecurity is in production. It needs to be considered in sales, in purchase. So there are no department boundaries, and there's no endpoint. So it must be established as a new dedicated field of action, actually everywhere. And therefore, again, it's essential to take a holistic view on the entire life cycle of a product. Just for example, what we see are the contractual agreements in which suppliers need to respond in a few days for cybersecurity events for the next 15 years after end of production. So this results also in changed requirements for the entire work. And as you probably know, depending on the life cycle, there are different activities to be done from cybersecurity. And the development, we need to specify, we need to evaluate the technical risks, doing the TARA, verifying and testing. Whereas in the production, we need to think about, okay, how can we handle the keys? How do we secure the generation of login data? We need also to ensure that our products came from A to B without being manipulated. And in the operational maintenance phase, to monitor and to react in case of incidences or provide secure updates or secure software updates if necessary. And in the decommission end of support phase, to follow or to communicate the end of support if needed, to delete user data, deactivate the device, cancel permissions, so depending on the product. So it's part in the end of the production, of course, of the product and in the company. So different tasks for different areas, but all related to cybersecurity. And further globalization makes it more complex. So there exist teams out there who never see or talk to each other. So we worked on one project with developers in Europe, in the US, in China, and in India, having then local production sites in Canada, and then basic and local teams in Europe for the operational phase, with hundreds of engineers. So to ensure here that everybody's following the same thing, it's a big, big challenge. And one thing, and that's my last slide, what helps us to concentrate on the basics. And from our point of view, to establish a proper culture. It's also a requirement from the 21434, but the standard is also quite unspecific here. But nevertheless, the topic should not be underestimated. And our approach here is to divide the topic culture in 3 aspects. The knowledge, so the awareness of the people, proven knowledge and beliefs. The behaviors, so how they act, how they handle, how they respond to cybersecurity topics. And the attitudes, the feeling and the emotions of the employees. So short said, to know, to act, and to feel in the right way. To make cybersecurity in the end an integral part of the employees' work and habits. And that's not something that comes from the top, or it's not just pushing policies and standards. So that people want to do the right thing by intention. All right, so that's my last slide. If you have any questions, I'm happy for any questions. If you need more information, maybe some of you know that we have also a book out there. So
Thank you, Ariel. Yes, so we have a few questions from the audience. The first one is safety is considered by vehicle buyers. So companies have an added incentive to focus on that other than legal regulation. The same buyer consideration doesn't exist for security. How do you motivate OEMs to have fundamental communicate for that? And also someone added that for safety, there are two organizations in the US that test vehicles and release ratings. Does it make sense to have something similar for security?
Okay, so I'm not sure if let me try to understand. So I think if I understand the question right, that it's people who buy the car assume that there are safety features, safety mechanism in place, that people are protected. So all the different features, the ADAS features, which is increasing and increasing. And here the colleague says that same bias consideration doesn't exist for cybersecurity. Honestly, I would not say that. I would more say it's assumed that's already implemented. So if I buy a car, I would assume that this is protected against, let's say, state-of-the-art attacks, and there's a dedicated level of cybersecurity already included, in the same way as I expect that for my smartphone. So maybe I would say that people maybe do not consider it as a reason to buy the car, but they already assume that this is not a topic, or this topic is already handled. That would be that's my, at least my personal point of view. And yeah, how to motivate, of course, apart from the regulations. That's a good question. Of course, in Europe, in the UN regulation, that's pushing that. In the end, it's something like the run who is the first where something happens. So if we remember back in 2015, the Jeep hack, which was quite famous, which ended up in overall costs of 600 million US dollar for Fiat Chrysler. So that's actually something which was public, a huge damage in reputation. And in the end, that's what companies need to avoid. The question is the motivation to reach something or to avoid something? But the last years, the number of attacks, or public attacks, or people, really the big amount of people was aware, maybe it was not that high. But again, if something happens, that could result that some companies do not survive. So it's in the end avoiding that something is happening.
So the next question is related actually to the previous question, is according to your experience, what will be the best way to document, share, and really make use of lesson learned?
I think one problem is that one problem we have today, not only for cybersecurity, is let's say that many engineers, many people are not, or that lessons learned is done, but it's not really lived. People create lessons learned, they sit together because they have to according to the process, and then put the document somewhere on SharePoint and everyone forgets it. I think for cybersecurity, it's important to do that in a systematic way. That in the best case, of course, depending on resources in the company, it's a global department who's really moderating that across the different projects to collect that and to combine the information. And that's what I see also apart from cybersecurity in many projects, that they are doing lessons learned, but there's no one behind it who really uses the information. And it's not the task of the projects to use the information. They need to provide it. But of course, there needs to be something centralized, some group, some organization who is evaluating that and improving the way of working. So I think here again, it's related to what I said, having an organization in place to take care about that, do it in a systematic way, and to improve the way of working, saving resources and being more efficient and effective.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question, I know it very well from my work. A car uses Android 10, which reached end of life this month. How to ensure the security of the car after the life cycle of a component in an item has reached end of life?
Okay. Yeah, that's again a very good question. So I think that's actually the whole end of support and what happens between end of support and decommissioning is, from my point of view, still an unanswered question so far. So there is no, let's say, state of the art solution. So we have also several customers who, are currently discussing what should we do in that time frame. Should we give the risk to the driver, but then we need to communicate that? But it's not only the risk to the driver; it's also to other people who are part on the road and part of the road user or whatever. So there are also other people, passengers from other cars who could be impacted. So if a car is hacked, then it makes an accident. So it's not that we can give the responsibility only to the driver. I would say still that's an unanswered question. One important thing, of course, is the communication of that. I'm not sure if that is here already the case. Actually, I don't have a concrete answer for that. So that's one of the discussion points we have in our projects right now.
Yeah, I think everyone is this open question.
Yeah.
So one last question is, considering there are many different points on how companies will apply the cybersecurity management policy, how we can conclude that the policy is working or not?
I think there are different ways. So policy working, I would see in a bigger context also the related culture and everything behind that people are aware of that. So the first thing to measure, do the employees know that there's a policy in place? So in many companies, policy exists, but it's not visible for the people, and they actually do not know it because, again, somewhere stored on SharePoint just to have it in case of an audit or assessment. Another point would be, for me, if we extend that more so to the culture, if people are following that, you can do some kind of interviews, but what we like is probably everybody should get some kind of an awareness training for cybersecurity, at least to get a basic information, to add there some kind of a Q&A or of an exam, but not to grill the people, but to get a feeling, okay, what is their understanding, what is their reaction, and how they are handling that. And of course, then I would work also with more KPIs, how many open topics, how much, also from a management point of view, how much resources are available, how much budget is available. So I think with KPIs, you can partly measure it, but of course not completely. That's always how to measure the culture then of a company. But the first thing would be, does everyone know that this is in place?
Okay. So we have only 1 minute left, so I just want to say that if someone else might have any question or want to speak with Manuel, of course, you can reach out to him. And we have the networking lounge, so you always can come there and ask your question if it's not been answered yet. So thank you.
Thank you
for the time. Thank you so much, and we'll meet in the next session. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you.